Good afternoon. Welcome back to Senate Education. We're going to return, and our final business of the day is S-282. This is a bill that Senator Clarkson took us through, Education, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. And we have Susanna Davis is asked to testify, as well as two students. Nice to see you both, who I understand were involved with this proposal. So with that, why don't the two of you introduce yourselves and then and tell us your thoughts and why you think this is a good idea.
Hi, I'm Emily Maiku. I'm a current junior at Mount Anthony Union High School, and I'm co-executive director of Vermont Student Anti-Racism Network, along with my colleague Addie. If you want to just do a quick intro, I guess.
Yeah, hi, I'm Addie. I am a student. I grew up in Bennington. I now go to Middlebury College, but I still am connected down in Bennington, and I am the co-executive director of VSARN.
And you both work with Senator Clarkson on this?
Yeah, we worked with Senator Clarkson and Representative Burrows.
Great. Okay, go ahead. Tell us why you think this is important.
Hi, as I just said, my name is Emily. Today, I just want to emphasize the profound significance of this bill. This legislation is not just about laws and rules; it's also about equity, and that's what makes it truly important. Equity is at the heart of this bill. It recognizes that fairness isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. This legislation seeks to create an education equity team pilot project, acknowledging that each school district or supervisory union might need different strategies to address issues like racism, diversity, and inclusion. Equity is not just a buzzword here, it's the driving force. It's about recognizing that different communities have different needs and ensuring that every student, regardless of background, gets a fair shot at success. Bill H6, this bill is a promise to build a more equitable educational landscape. Let us champion this cause, knowing that in fostering equity, we sow the seeds for a brighter, fairer future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. I wanted to just add to that. So for the past few months, as Emily said, we've been working on this bill S-282. We believe this is important because we've heard testimony from students around the state on why this matters. Here are some quotes that we got in a survey from students around the state. I just noticed people calling people of color offensive terms and names is one quote. I've overheard some seemingly racist jokes. I can recall several instances when someone was discriminated against for their ethnicity. And I've noticed people making jokes based on other people's race. More times than not, it's within friend groups and meant to be a joke. But even then, it's still very unacceptable. And we also received some statistics. So 71% of students see microaggressions or think they see microaggressions regularly. 65% say, yes, there is racism in our school community. And 63% hear racial slurs regularly. So if we don't have a safe environment to grow up in, how are we as students expected to succeed as adults? What I believe is that if you invest in us as young people, we will invest back in society. So we urge you to consider S-282 so that we can build a better society together. Thank you.
And committee will recall that the bill proposes to create these education equity teams, 3 of them, I believe, in the state that would focus on anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion by reviewing equity-related policies and curriculum in their schools. So have you ever done this in a school? Have you ever tried it at some level?
Yeah, we have at some level, not at this level as legislation, but we've gone into schools and done lessons on equity and anti-racism and inclusion, and it's been really successful. We actually just did one yesterday, and we went into a school and talked to students about the survey results that we received and how discrimination exists in their school and what they think about it. And we had a really good conversation and it was really impactful. And a lot of students came up to us and said like, yeah, we want to help. So I think expanding this with legislation would definitely be beneficial.
Yes, Senator Keeler, please.
I just want to say thank you so much for your testimony, and I'm also so sorry that so many of you are experiencing the harm that is clearly occurring in your schools. That is very disheartening and very troubling. And I hope we can improve on things, and your bill seems like it would be a step in the right direction. So grateful for your work on that. Around curriculum, this is something we've all been grappling with, that we don't have a statewide curriculum, so it's difficult for us to make any kind of mandates around specific curricula. But one of the things I think we all feel pretty committed to is taking a look at our standards and at our education quality standards, and really trying to find out where the teaching of, for example, Holocaust education, where does that happen along a K through 12 education? And same with what you're bringing up here today, where do anti-racist themes and work and readings occur across a K through 12 curriculum within the standards that we have here in Vermont? So thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing about your curriculum audit when you do it in your school. If you could please share it with us, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? So have either of you thought, and I know Addie, she's a constituent, a little bit, we know each other through her incredible advocacy with homelessness, and things of that nature. But have either of you ever thought about maybe another way to address this? And I'm just sort of thinking outside, what if we took this $10,000, made it accessible to students in another way? Why do it this way? Any thoughts?
I mean, I feel like going through legislation, I think is one of the best ways to go about it. And I definitely think that going about it in the sense of like curriculum and going at it through the lens that this project aims to go through is honestly, like, in my opinion, the best way to do it, especially since I think that within this bill, there's a lot of flexibility within each district and each supervisory union, as I kind of talked about in my speech a little bit. Because I mean, every supervisory union, every district is can maybe inherently different and may have certain issues that need to be addressed more than others. So I do believe that flexibility is a great part of this bill as well.
And any advice on how you might choose, or how the legislature or the Agency of Education would choose the schools that would participate in the pilot? Would it be by application? Or do you think there's a way to identify schools that might need this a little bit more than others?
Yeah, we're thinking that the bill would create like a commission to figure out which schools would want to do it based on need. So which schools, it would be how we envision it is sort of like an application process, but also just like a need assessment and based on what school has the most desire and need for this work.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, again, thank you, ladies, for your testimony and for your advocacy. It's encouraging to see that you're stepping up, you're addressing issues that you have a passion about. I appreciate that. I wanted to go piggyback on what Chair Campion had mentioned. That's the funding proposed is not 10,000, it's 50,000. It's 5 teams. Why not? To the chair's point about looking at the perspective on how to accomplish the same goal, is why not use like the Zoom format that we're using here with to create the teams, to have the 5 teams talking to each other, prove the value of the interaction, and then ask for funding to take the umbrella further to encompass the state. Why kick off with asking for money, kind of before the proof of concept's even accomplished?
Yeah, I can definitely answer that question. So we've sort of already been doing this bill just without the funding. We've been going around to schools, like I said earlier, and doing presentations. And what we've found, we've done it both virtually and in person. And the in-person ones are just so much more powerful because you're in community and you're working together as people. And when you're virtual, it's kind of like you're kind of distant from each other. And we also think it's important to compensate students for their time and adults too, because this is hard work. And like Emily and I have been doing this work uncompensated for the past like 3 years, and we're finally starting to change that. And it's really powerful to give students money for their time. So I think that it's important to have this funding component. And we can also share testimony from students with you around the state from schools that we've gone to show that like how the interactions that we've had have been.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well said.
Anything else? Emily, what's your last name again? Sorry, I don't have your name.
Maiku,
Arcu, okay. Nice to see you. Senator Hashim, anything?
No, I've spoken to, I know I've spoken to Addie, and Emily, have we spoken before? I feel like we were on Zoom at some point.
I feel like
And I think
though.
in a conversation, just generally with VSAR, but no, I appreciate the work that you're doing and the advocacy that you're doing, and thank you for raising this. And I think it's worthwhile of a continued conversation to see what we can do moving forward.
As Senator Gulick said early on, we've been also tasked with looking at Holocaust education. Is there a way that might fit into this? In other words, through these assessments, if you will, could that kind of information be sort of assessed and reported back on?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I think that part of this bill, it's equity in all forms. So it includes like anti-Semitism, it includes Holocaust education. So we could definitely sort of like combine things and see what schools are teaching what in terms of curriculum. And then even as part of the equity pilot project, include more advocacy around curriculum around Holocaust education.
It does make me want to ask, did you both experience some kind of Holocaust education in your ninth or at any point in your educational experience?
Yeah, I definitely did. At some of my classes, there's a specific class at my school, I believe, dedicated to learning about the Holocaust as well. So I've definitely have. I don't know about.
Yeah, I have too. I remember I took a class that included a lot of education on the Holocaust. But as a person who's Jewish, I always felt like it wasn't quite to the extent that it needed to be. So I think that there's more that we can do.
Yeah. Senator Hashim.
Thank you. Addie, I actually have a question for you, and it's my fault for not being prepared enough here, but we got a Human Rights Commission report, correct? No, I'm sorry, it was the Ethnic Studies Working Group report that we got earlier on.
Yeah.
Act 1, yep, sorry, thank you. And Addie, I think I recall seeing your name on the list as in there, so thank you for doing that work, but my question is, can you talk a little bit more about the connections between some of the requests in that report or suggestions in that report and how it ties into S-282 or doesn't tie into 282? Are there any redundancies or any gaps that we can fill?
Yeah, I think the two kind of complement each other, because the Ethnic Studies Act 1 work really is focused on like recommendations, right? And then our project is really focused on implementation. So we could definitely take like the framework that Act 1 had created and use that when we go into schools and do this pilot project. And we've talked to Amanda Garces about this, and we've talked to a bunch of people from the commission or from the from the commission, and I think that they would really complement each other, and we could help with that like local implementation through this pilot project.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to know. Thank you both. Is Susanna here?
Yeah.
Okay, do you mind both staying on while we hear from Susanna Davis as well?
Of course.
Have a conversation? Great. Ms. Davis, welcome to Senate Education. Thank you for your interest in S282 and your willingness to testify. So please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Buenas tardes, everybody. For the record, Susana Davis, Racial Equity Director for the state. Very pleased to be here. Thank you for permitting me to testify today. I am really enthused to see us taking up issues of equity and inclusion in schools. You've already noted, I believe it was Senator Gulick earlier who noted the challenge with creating statewide policy and regulations around education in this tricky mix of local and state level authorities. So I recognize that we're looking for solutions that are going to fit statewide, but also be really well tailored to the nuances and the challenges of every community. So I really appreciate that. And I love seeing youth-led and student-led work happening as well. These are folks who are going to have the longest to live with the decisions that we make. And I think that in the United States, we often have a culture of disempowering young people from participating in society because we assume that they know or can do less than adults. But I can assure you there's some really inept adults out here who could learn from some of our young folks. So I really appreciate that. This bill, of course, S282 is a companion bill to a House bill that has already had a bit of airtime in the hearing room. I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised, actually. This came to our office sort of secondhand through a colleague in another agency, but we were largely unaware that these bills were moving. And so having had a chance to review those previous rounds of testimony and review the bill language itself, we have some really serious concerns, and I just wanted to speak to the committee a bit about them. So I'm just going to walk through the provisions of the bill.
Great. And do we have,
So of course,
we have written testimony from you?
I did not, what I have is a markup of the as introduced version. I can
Great.
send that over. It's got margin.
That'd be terrific. Yeah, thank you.
I'll send that right over. So of course, this bill at its core, what it does is it creates 5 groups of 5 people around the state in different districts who are going to be reviewing policy and curricula. And it also creates a commission that is supposed to be managing all of this. I think that the intent is really, really wonderful. And I worry that the details that are unsaid or unwritten are not what we think they are. In other words, I think that we need a little bit of a reality check on some of these details. So I would like to highlight a few of them. So the first one is, and I'm looking at page 2, line 3, which shows the membership of the commission. It lists 1 student who would be appointed by the governor, 1 representative from the Social Equity Legislative Caucus, a designee of the state board, a designee of the Office of Racial Equity, and a member of the House Committee. I'm noticing here that the Social Equity Caucus membership is significantly more House members than Senate members, and there is a second seat calling for a House member. So I'm not certain if this legislature has considered the likelihood that there will be bicameral representation on this commission, but that's one thing that I noticed that you may want to consider. Another one is a few lines down, line 12, the powers and duties. This is where I'm going to spend a lot of time here. So the bill states that the commission is going to identify up to 5 SUs or districts and is going to manage the distribution of stipends and provide open support. I want to talk a little bit about what that actually means. Let's start with the identification of the district. So that's, of course, likely going to require a process that's going to take longer than the bill outlines. For example, just thinking of my own work with other commissions like this, when we're thinking about how to identify recipients or participants in a program, that's probably going to involve everything from publicizing the work to soliciting proposals, translations. Maybe that means we have to have interpreters lined up for our public engagement. We may have to do community consultation. It would be correct to do community consultations, info sessions, etc. All of those things take time. I note that the bill calls for the first meeting to be held in or by August of this year. So by the time we actually get started as a commission, the academic year 24-25 will already be underway. So by the time the commission itself does its work to solicit the input, to solicit the proposals from the schools, to make its determination on which 5 districts to pick, the school year is going to be significantly underway. So if the work doesn't begin in earnest until midway through an academic year, and then we expect the 5 groups around the 5 districts to conduct some of their work, report back to the commission, have the commission digest those 5 different district situations and work products, and then come up with a report by that September to the legislature, I worry that that's not a reasonable timeline for us to meaningfully be able to have the groups do their work and then the commission do its work on recommending whether and how to expand that kind of a program. So the timeline is a little bit concerning with just the identifying of the districts, only because the number of months that would likely take already starts the work pretty late. I also want to move to the next piece, which is the management and distribution of stipends and the providing of open support to the equity teams. So I know that the bill language is kind of quick on this, but it's really massively understated. So the Office of Racial Equity is going to effectively be doing all of the commission's work on this. So the commission is directed to select the district and to manage the distribution of the stipends. But what that actually means, managing distribution of funds, it means you've got to request and receive and review and relay and chase people down and return legal and tax documents. In this case, that's going to be we're going to have to do that for 25 people because it's 5 people in 5 districts. So it's that legwork for 25 people across the state. It also means things like collecting and approving of invoices, receipts, that kind of thing to validate those payments. People who may have banking issues, confusion over the documents, lost invoices, lost receipts, incomplete things, are all going to need additional special attention and additional handholding through that process beyond the standard. So that's supposed to be the work of the commission. But that's largely unrealistic, right? Because we know who the members of the commission are. A student member has, of course, school obligations, so that person's time is already going to be limited. And further, that person's not going to have access to the state of Vermont procurement process or funds. So we know the student rep can't meaningfully manage the distribution of state monies. We also know that for the 2 legislator seats, as far as I can tell, legislators generally don't have the same authority to manage internal funds appropriated to the Office of Racial Equity. So I don't anticipate that they'll be able to meaningfully manage those monies either. Also, and I recognize this may be a sensitive topic, I don't know if we're even allowed to mention it here, but just based on where we are in election cycles, I imagine that when this commission's work is getting underway at the end of this year, our legislator members will be, let's say, spending a lot of time in the districts in the latter half of the year. And so one of the other things that concerns me is that bandwidth and that ability to be able to meaningfully participate on this kind of commission and manage the funding in the way that the bill calls for. I also note the next member, of course, is going to be a rep by the state board. But the state board is supported pretty much entirely by the Agency of Education. So if the state board doesn't even handle its own procurement needs, it's unreasonable to expect them to participate in managing the pilot program's procurement needs. So with that, I think there's probably going to be likely some invisible back end work that's offloaded to AOE via that seat of the state board rep. So then, of course, that leaves the 5th person, which is the racial equity director or designee. And the thing about the or designee part is that the only two other, well, of the staff of the Office of Racial Equity, we have two who could conceivably take on that work because their portfolios do include education topics. But neither of them actually is contracted to perform any grant or finance management work. So having that work be done by those two staff would then raise questions about job classification and workload appropriateness, and general just worker solidarity issues. Those two staff are on point to handle some education issues, but their portfolios also include everything from housing to workforce, infrastructure, training, health equity, communications, policy. It's a small team and we really do kind of do it all. So realistically, I don't see existing ORE staff having the bandwidth to manage stipends for 25 people around the state, for this kind of plus the administrative and technical needs that are going to be associated with all this, which really means that likely is going to fall on the racial equity director to handle all of that work. And then, of course, the commission is also instructed to provide open support to the equity teams. It's unclear to me exactly what that means or what it would entail. But I wonder also how we could practically achieve that if, according to page 3, line 6, a majority of the membership is going to constitute a quorum. That's 3 people, which means if those 3 people are emailing with each other about this, then they may be potentially triggering or violating open meeting laws. So if we know that, if we can safely assume that the racial equity director is likely to be the admin person, and is also a member of this commission, then that means the racial equity person serving in the admin role, talking to just 2 members, is already triggering some of the open meeting laws and may end up stunting their ability to perform the work effectively without having to warn every conversation as a meeting. That might mean that person can only have one-on-one conversations with every member in order to get things done, which just creates a lot more administrative burden. So I really wanted to just highlight what all this means, because sometimes when we just say a commission is going to have the administrative, technical, and legal support of an office, I think that implies a level of capacity that we simply don't have. And I wanted to make sure that the committee has realistically considered on whose shoulders that is going to fall, and whether it really is a shared workload between 5 people, or whether it ends up by default sitting with the only person or persons who actually can manage funds. Another point I just wanted to make, I'm at the bottom of page 2, where the report of the commission is going to include discussion of the learning that occurred and the shifts that were made. I would be curious to know who's learning and what kind of shifts we're looking at. It would be great to have a little bit more specificity in the language so that the equity teams and the commission can really understand what's being sought there. I am also going to note that page 3, line 7 indicates the commission is going to meet quarterly once they identify the 5 districts. Presumably that permits there to be more meetings before that is done. But I worry about the quarterly cadence after that. If the commission's meeting quarterly, how are they really going to be able to meaningfully and actively support the work that's being required above? Especially again, if we're limited to very small group conversations, or having to warn every single email chain so as not to violate open meeting laws, then having only quarterly meetings means that a lot of that work is going to have to happen on the back end by the one or few people who can actually do it. And then they'll only have that limited guidance once a quarter from the full group. So I want us to consider how much face time this bill permits the group to have with each other. I know that later down on page 3, the team members are supposed to be appointed by the superintendent. And I would love to know if the legislature has a sense of what criteria they would like superintendents to use. One of the things we found is that students and faculty who have the most helpful input on these topics are often those who are alienated from the school community and may not be on the radar of school leaders or superintendents. So some of those most impacted people might actually be the ones most disconnected. And so it would be good to know what criteria will be used to select those teams in the 5 districts. I am almost done, I promise. The last thing that I just wanted to point out is the funding. The appropriation, of course, is $50,000, which is supposed to represent 5 stipend chunks of $10,000 for the 5 districts. This 50K represents the entirety of the stipends, which means there are no funds that are allocated for commission members to receive per diems or any other financial support for carrying out this work, right? So again, if the commission needs to do things like publicize the work, hold a public forum, have an ASL interpreter at an open meeting, which the government is legally required to do if requested. Who covers things like translation and interpreter costs? Who covers fee for space for a public meeting, or supplies, or food? I note that in the bill, page 3, the bottom of page 3 allows stipends to be used for transportation, food and supplies for meetings, other resources, et cetera, for the teams. But I find it odd that the commission would not be expected to have the same kinds of costs, and that those are not represented in the staffing, excuse me, in the funding. There may be additional costs related to managing those stipends or related to staffing the commission, and those aren't represented here. And so what I'm noticing there is, one, a disparity where we've acknowledged the importance of paying people for their labor in the districts, but not necessarily at the commission level. And I think if you're going to have a student rep and the 2 legislators in particular on that commission, those are probably the 3 seats that are going to be most impacted by the lack of a per diem option. So I would just encourage us to rethink that and to rethink whether the 50K is just supposed to represent 25 people reviewing policies, but not actually supporting the work of the commission that's supposed to be overseeing that. So that's a really quick and cursory exploration of some of our thoughts. Again, what I don't want to do is come in and ruin anything or crash a party. But I do really have serious concerns about the process and about the logistics and the realistic administrative journey that this group is going to have to take. And I have often found that just empaneling a working group of people and saying, you all shall share this workload, doesn't actually mean that, practically speaking, all of those members can share that workload. And so I want us to make sure that whatever we're putting down and codifying in statute is realistic and doable, and that we're not just saying the words, but that they can actually be implemented as designed. So that concludes my comments, but of course, I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we would appreciate those in writing. That way we can, if you could email those over to our committee assistant, we would appreciate it. Questions for Ms. Davis?
Very comprehensive.
Yeah, very comprehensive. I mean, I'm thinking we can go different ways with this. There was a lot of money for sure. We know that Holocaust education's out there. We know this is out there. We know that Susanna Davis clearly mentions, rightfully so, that this is a complex thing. I'm wondering if this is a way for us to actually spend some time and some money better understanding some of the, curricular issues out there. I'm not sure, but there might be different ways to get at what we're doing, trying to do. Senator Sheen. Senator Hewlett.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all, Addie and Emily. Thank you so much. Stay in touch. You know how to reach us. We're going to keep working on these issues. We're going to keep working on this bill. And we appreciate your partnership and you both have a bright future.
Thank you. Can I just mention something really quick? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I just want to say, Susanna, if you want to talk with us about the bill, we'd be happy to have a conversation and we can sort of workshop it because I think Hudson had reached out to your office, but we're happy to like go over details and figure out things so that's less of a burden on you. So I'll email you and we can figure it out. We're happy to talk about it.
Yeah, great, thank you. I feel the same as well. I remember hearing in the previous testimony, someone mentioned that ORE is on board, and it was a little shocking to me because I didn't remember actually having that conversation. So I would definitely welcome it.
Yeah.
Thank No, please go ahead, Addie.
No, I was just gonna say that would be great. And I don't know if Hudson reached out or not, but we'll talk about it.
Great. So one step you might consider is if the three of you can get together and come back. We do this often with a new proposal that might work. You know some of the struggles that we heard from this committee and from Susanna on implementation, etc. But I think you're also hearing that people are enthusiastic and want to work on these issues together. And we also know that the Holocaust education piece is out there. So anything the three of you can do together will be most welcome. And maybe we can have you come back in a couple of weeks and let us know where things stand.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Thank you all.